Everyone, welcome back to ISR World Academy. If you are new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update on upcoming tutorial and tech insight. I am Firoj Alam Khan. Today I am going to teach you about Singleton Design Pattern. Singleton Design Pattern, it is one of the most important design pattern in the software industry. Basically, all the directly or indirectly use the Singleton Design Pattern. And even the developer directly or indirectly they use in their project. So it is better you should know why Singleton Design Pattern and how you can use it. The agenda of this session to cover the Singleton Design Pattern fundamental concept, why it is important, and what is how the pattern works, and what kind of the issue can occur, like multi-threaded involvement, the thread safety issue, or lazy initializations. We'll deep dive into this advanced concept to solve this problem and see the singleton design pattern where it fit into the real life cases, how it solved the problem. So we'll deep dive into those things and should also avoid that when you're creating a singleton design pattern, what are the pitfalls and what are the best practices. Then after that last session, we'll have a knowledge check. So you can check how much you grasp or how much you learn from the session yourself. Introduction to Singleton Design Pattern. Singleton Design Pattern ensures that a class has only one instance and provide a global point of access to it. You must understand this concept or this definition. It will help you when you are creating a class. So what it is telling that you have only one instance of the classes and global point of the access. So you have a public access that can be publicly accessible. Second, it is only one instance. You cannot create more than one instance. And what problem it solves, why we need a singleton design pattern. So if you look into this diagram, and let's take example, if you need to log your application and there are different users in different perform the different operation, you want to log your. So if not is a singleton, you will be creating a multiple instance of the object and each instance it create its own file and log the information. But you don't want this to happen because you want only one file happen and multiple user when you access it or multiple class accessing it right into the single. So that is the reason you need a single point of access. So logging, it is one of the example where you need a one point or single point of access globally. And all the logger or basically all the classes or user when they perform the operation, those information logged into the sequentially into the log file. Not like you want to, whenever each user or each object or each class create own file and log the information. No, because logging, the purpose is that single point of access, all the information you need to be written into the single log file and later point of time, if anything goes wrong and all those things, you go in those log file and do the debugging. So this is the purpose of the and this problem solved by the singleton design pattern. See where we can use and why singleton pattern. So you need a control access. So what does mean by the control access? Basically, you ensure that there is only one instance and so no duplicate are created. So you can, as earlier I explained you the logging. So if you have a multiple or duplicate instance, it will create multiple files and it will create a problem. But you don't want. If you have a single instance, single control, so you can create one object and all it to be handled by that one. So that is a control access. Second, save resources. It manages the resource efficiently, especially when the object is heavy initiated, like database connection or the file manager. So you have to understand in the let's take creating a database connection to the database. So it is not the simple thing because it requires a lot of memory uses and dedicated connection to the database. So if you are having a multiple instance of that, it create a problem. So you generally use a resource pool. So that is a database connection pool. You create a fixed set of the connection and reusing again and again. You don't want to recreate those things. So connection pooling is one of the example for the singleton design pattern where it make a single point entry of you don't create a multiple connection multiple times. So you have to understand how the singleton design pattern solve the problem and why it is needed. So one, we have learned the logging. Second, this is database connection pool. So you need to create a pool and need to access single point entry. You don't want again you are creating a connection pool. Those are the very expensive costs. Creation of the object is not easy. It is very expensive. And third, you need a global access point. So you want to manage globally. So manage any part of the application can access the single instance directly. So you don't want to create multiple instances. So these are the primary reason when you are creating a singleton design pattern. So you have to understand basically when you're thinking about creating a singleton design pattern in your project. First, you need a controlled access. Second, saved resources and global access point. If it matches this criteria, so you are good to go with to create a singleton design pattern. If you doesn't fit the requirement this, so you don't need to create a singleton design pattern. So these are the basic requirement when you're creating a singleton design pattern. Let's discuss how singleton pattern work and how we can create a singleton pattern. So the first requirement of the singleton design pattern, it should not expose the construction method or construction. So we can create an object from outside the world and number of the object. So do you think how we can do that one? I think you are guessing right. We can use private constructor. So private, that means it is not exposed to the outside of the world. You cannot create a construct or you cannot create an object outside the world. So the private constructor tells that you can create object within a class cell. Now we got the idea. So we are restricting the creation of the object outside the world through the private constructor. Now we need to hold this object, what we are planning to give to the world to use it. So there are two options when we're creating a variable or object. One is the instance label, another is the class label. Instance label generally work when you are creating an instance of the object and you can access it through that instance. But this will not help in this case because we want the class label. So it can be accessible through the class. So we'll be creating an object as a class label. So we have to use a static variable. Now, the 2 point is satisfied. Now, third point, we want to access this as you aware that we protected the construction. We're not able to create it. We have a static variable. We can create an object and hold the instance of that. But now you need something to access this variable outside of the class and you need to use into the your world. So we have to expose the utility method. So exposing as a utility method, we have to use a static public static method. So we have to create a method as a public static. So now these are the three main fundamental concept or main thing when you creating a singleton design pattern. So by using this, we can able to create the singleton design pattern class. Let's look into the code, see how it works. Let's look into the class. So this class represents the simple basic implementation of the singleton class. So as we discussed, we need constructor as a private. So if you're creating a singleton base class, we have to provide a constructor as a access specifier as a private. So we cannot able to create an object outside of the world by using a new method. And the second requirement, we need an instance that can be accessible. So we have to create as a static instance. And now you have a requirement this instance need to be accessible in your board or outside of this class. So we have to expose the utility method. So if you look into this, public static, singleton, basic, and get instance. So this get instance is a utility method we are using to get the instance of the singleton class. So if you look into this, we are doing an instance equal to checking a null. So we want to create if instance is all it is not yet created, then only you create an instance of singleton class. Otherwise, you don't have to. You return the earlier created instance. So it will create only one instance because you just calling each number of times whenever you are calling, it will check if it is already created, it will assign those value to instance and return the same object. So this way it will work on a single threaded model. So if you are calling creating object, if there is no concurrency and all those things, this basic implementation of the singleton class work very well. But if there are the chances, if you are using this concept into the multi-threaded environment or multi-concurrency environment, so there is a chances that this instance you are expecting behave differently or may chance to create instance two times. So there is maybe possibility that the controller came to this line number 18 is multiple thread you are creating. It will come instance equal to null and they getting the same equal to null and creating a different instances. So that time what will happen? It create a multiple instances in multi-threaded environment because the thread trying to create instance the same time it came to the instance when we are checking null, it found that instance is null. Now we have issue that we want only one instance of the classes at the time, but due to the concurrency, it impacting or creating a multiple instances. So you can think about how we can solve this problem. We'll discuss in a few seconds. Meantime, you can just think there is a concurrency issue, how you're going to resolve it, what are the way you can resolve it. So let's discuss in a couple of minutes. Now we've encountered the problem of thread safety. So basically, in multi-threaded environment, if I'm going to use my earlier version of the singleton class, it will be used appropriately or incorrectly. So if there is a chances that instead of creating one object, it may create multiple objects. So how we going to prevent this creation of object? Only allow to create only one object, even in the multi-threaded environment. So you might be learn the Java thread programming model. So there is a concept called synchronization. So synchronization basically tell you that acquiring a log on object or log on the class level. So it will not allow the other thread to enter into the method until unless it release the log. So we can going to implement synchronization. So if you remember, we have a public static method, and that is the entry point where we can call get a singleton instance so we can synchronize. Let's see the code snippet how it looks. Now look into the this piece of simple code. We are trying to solve the synchronization or thread safety issue. So as I already discussed about, there is a concept called synchronized and synchronization. So basically we want to acquire a log when a thread enter into this creation of the object get instance. So we can achieve by using a synchronized keyword. For doing this one, the JVM has to handle a lot of the thing and it degrades the performance because it has to acquire a lock in this method as well as other threads who are coming trying to access that. But they need to wait, go to the waiting stage. And once it is released the first thread, then it assigns this access to the another thread and acquire a lock. So there is a performance degradation issue in this approach. So we can think about some another alternative approach which can solve the rate synchronization as well as give the optimization. So you can think about how we can achieve this one. We'll discuss in a few minutes. So now we have discussed the synchronization issue and the performance issue. Now you might be thinking how we are going to resolve the performance issue when we are using synchronizers, but we need a solution to solve multi-threaded environment. So there is another approach. It's called Wilpow implementation. So Wilpow implementation basically what it is done, it taking the advantages of the class loading. So you might be aware that when the JVM load the classes, so first apart from the system library and other dependent library, and when your class comes into the picture, so static classes are loaded first and instances are created at the time of loading. So we're going to use this concept and create a singleton class, and that will resolve the problem of synchronization because we don't need when we instantiate the classes by using at the time of class loading by the using the concept of the class static class and the subclass. So it will avoid it the multiple times creation of object because object is already created when they were class load into the ZB. So it is a only creation of object. There is another concept it's called lazy initialization. You will see after some time. Let's see the implementation of big implementation, how we can create by using this concept, the singleton class. The approach is similar. So we have to provide a private constructor. And basically, we want to load or create the class at the time of creation of class loading to the JV. So we have to use it for the static class, the subclasses, private subclasses. On that, we'll be creating an instance of the our singleton class, and in utility method will be returning into the same. So if you look into the code number, code line number 8 to 9, 10. So we just created one static class called singleton helper, and this is has a variable will for singleton, and we'll be creating a instance will for instance when the class load itself, and we are going to return the same object when we are calling instance. So this will solve the problem that we have an earlier issue when we use the synchronization. So here it is one of the best approach to implement the singleton classes, and there is also concept called lazy initialization. So that is just opposite of this. So lazy initialization tell that whenever the first request comes, we create an object. So it is similar to the simple implementation. So in this, we are not creating the object until unless it is required. So if you look into that, we are just creating an object only when it is required. So when the first time requirement came, we need a singleton object, we are just creating. So this is the lazy initialization. But in build for singleton, what we are doing, we are creating instance at the time of JV in the class mode. So those are the different concepts, and it will depend on the how you're going to use it. Generally, it is advisable. You have to use early creation of the object, and it will be available to the because you want a single-handed controller for your class, and that going to be used by the multiple your client or multiple object. So you should have because it gives a performance benefit also some cases. So your first initiation, if you have a ready creation of an object, if you already created at the starting the JVM load, so you can easily access it. But in case of other way, lazy initialization, it create an object when it is required at the time of the first requirement came into that. So it may require some time execution to load those. Suppose you are making a database connection or waiting a configuration file. So that time heavy process. So that will create a problem because it is make you application slowness because that need to be load and do the something. But if you are already done the eagerly initialization, At the time of zero load, it gives a performance benefit. Your object is already available. So there is a pros and cons when you are using a different concept and all those things. So you have seen the three version of implementation of the singleton classes, but still there is an issue. So I'm giving you exercise, you guys to find out the what is the further issue. I just give you a hint. There is an issue with the cloning. When you use a cloning, I can clone the instance and recreate a multiple object of this. So can you think about how can you restrict the cloning, not allow to, because we want singleton object, we don't need multiple objects. Another problem you can think about is still there. When you're using the serialization, when I'm serialize object and deserializing is not done properly, you'll be creating a multiple instance of the singleton classes. This is another issue. So, and one more, I'll tell you the further issue. Java has a reflection API. In the reflection API, you can call or create an object without calling the constructor. But you want my class to be protected from all this. So think about this one. I'll be creating another video for this to provide you the solution how you're going to solve these issues. Now let's discuss what is a real world use cases where we really need to use a singleton design pattern. Other design pattern doesn't help us to solve the problem. So as earlier I discussed into the while explaining about the singleton design pattern, one of the scenario logging services. So in the login services, basically you need a single instance to control your services for the login functions. And because you will be using the logging into the single environment or the multi-threaded environment. So you will be generating a single log. So one of the best use cases to go with the singleton design pattern and provide a single access control and handle everything for login services. Another example you have to use when we have a configuration management. So basically look into that web application or any application. You need a piece of data or the configuration data that need to be loaded only once. And database login credential detail and on all those things. This will be loaded based on the configuration file or based on the local environment file because you cannot keep this information checked in into the Git bucket or the version control system. This should be the separate and this need to be loaded in the JVM of particular environment you are running the application. Suppose you are using a dev environment, you need to load the dev configuration. If you are using a UAT environment configuration, into UAT configuration it will be loaded. Similarly, if you have a production, so this configuration is independent of your source code and it need to be loaded only once and controlled throughout the application. So this is one of the best example where you can use a singleton design pattern. Another best example, database connection. So as you'll be loading the configuration and you need to make a database connection for the object and all those things and need to be handled singly. This database connection and the next database connection pool will be managed one-handed because you don't want it need to be handled multiple instances because you want to central point of the control access. So singleton design pattern solve this problem. Similarly, we have a thread pool. Basically, thread pool nothing but you have a multiple thread created. To manage those thread pool, you need a single controller to handle it because you don't want multiple instance of the thread pool and because each instance has their own thread pool. So you will be creating another complexity or an annoying problem. So singleton design pattern handle this very well. One of the important things like case manager. If you work with the any case or you created AM case or manager work with the singleton basis. So it handles single-handed your cache names. Service locator. This is one of the other design pattern. I'll be creating this in the future to explain how service locator work. Just now you can understand there are the different services based on the your need, based on the parameter you want to get those services and you want to perform it. So this native service locator need to be work as a single component and it plugged with the multiple services and handling of this need to be done through the singleton because you want to be handled, the services can be handled singly. And you will be managing the object instance creation of the service locator through this single-handed controller. You might go with the multiple or instance based on the requests, based on the sessions. There is a different approaches you can use while creating, but this service locator you will be handling as a single point of the controller. So that is the best approach to use your singleton design pattern. Now you are the Java developer. I know you are looking this video. So you might be use one of the famous framework like Spring or Spring Boot. So you have an application context or the framework context that need to be managed single-threaded. That always done by the single-threaded model or what you call singleton design pattern to handle your application context or the framework context need to be loaded or change when all those things happening. Now let's discuss common pitfall and the best practices. Earlier, I have asked you the few questions about the issue with the earlier implementation. One of the implementation issue is the synchronization. So, how you're going to handle the synchronization issue? So, we have to aware that if a singleton class implements serializable, you might accidentally create a multiple instance during a deserialization. So to resolve this problem, we have to use read resolve method to fix this problem. So try out yourself to solve the problem. If you not, I'll be creating another video with the implementation explaining how you can do this one. Second, we discuss cloning. So basically, clone is one of the way that we can allow to copy the object or create instance cloning object. So you will be creating a duplicate object of the same. So, but in case of the singleton design pattern, we want to restrict the cloning. So I'll be just providing a hint how you can do it. So clone method is a part of the object class and implementing the clonable interface. So what you have to override this clone not supported exception. So it will print the cloning of the object. Hopefully, you are. Hi guys, now the time for the exercises. We have learned the singleton design pattern and various way to create the singleton design pattern. Let's evolve it how much we have understood. The first question is, what is the primary purpose of singleton design pattern? This is a fundamental question when you are building a singleton design pattern. So why we need the singleton design pattern? These are the options. Pause the video and answer and check which is your correct answer or not with the answer provided. The correct answer is D. The singleton design pattern is specifically designed to ensure that only one instance of class is created and that is provided a global point of access. This pattern is commonly used for a managing resource like configuration setting, logging, database connection. Hope your answer will be correct. Now moving to the another question. Which of the following approach is the most efficient way to implement a thread-safe singleton pattern? During the different type of the singleton pattern, we have discussed what issue arises and how we are going to solve. If you watch the video, you are going to answer this question. So, what would be your answer? The answer B is correct. Using a static inner helper class, also known as build for singleton implementation, is the most efficient way to implement a thread safe singleton. The instance is created only once, thus leveraging the class loader mechanism to ensure thread safety without synchronization override. Thank you guys for watching this singleton design pattern video. So our aim is to provide the knowledgeable information in the simplified manner and clear the each and every concept. So you will be expert in your uh, academy, or maybe if you're preparing for the interview or you want to apply this concept into the your software development, you can use this concept. And don't forget to like and subscribe this channel. If you want to reach us, so our email ID and website is there, so you can get more detail about the academy and be in touch with us and like and subscribe. Have a good day. Thank you so much.